Hi, everyone. It is time for the Janelle Show, and I am here with Darlyn-Feythe. I just want to share a little bit about her. L.Woods PR was started 5 years ago by the Southern California native Darlyn-Feythe Valentine. After working in various parts of the fashion industry, she realized that with a lot of designers have talent, but no way to showcase or bring awareness to their brand. The idea was made, and L.Woods PR was created to provide a way that designers could publicize their brands and their talents. So today we are talking with Darlene. Sorry, I'll edit that. Darlyn-Feythe Valentine of L.Woods PR. Hi, Darlyn. How are you?
Hi.
It is so good to speak to you today.
Yes, well, I'm glad to be here and it's I'm excited for our conversation.
Me too. Me too. I'm looking forward to it. So, tell us a little bit more about L.Woods PR. How did you? I read the bio, but can you tell us a little bit more about how you started that?
Yeah, well, I technically started it 7 years ago as a side hustle. I originally come from fashion industry. I graduated from FITM and I was doing a lot of product development and production at the time. And I had always really liked PR, and on the side I had been, like helping other agencies part-time as an intern, and then I went over to do it part-time and I just really enjoyed it. But I also realized in the process that there was just a lot of designers that were really great at what they did, but no one knew who they were. And I just kind of thought, how do I change that? I got really invested in it. And um, so during like between jobs one day and between a move, I decided, I was like, well, the industry was so unstable at that time. So I was like, well, why don't I just start my own thing? So that's what I did. I went back into all my books and everything from school and like had them all in the back seat, all my research for 2 weeks, literally just trying to start a business in the car so that I wouldn't lose anything. And I knew someone at the time who had a jewelry line, and I've always loved jewelry. And I said, well, you're starting and I'd love to help you and see what we can do. And it just kind of started from there. And then I got more clients throughout, time through mostly on Instagram and just doing a lot of research. And now it's been 7 years later, and now I'm doing this full time. And that line that I started with, we're still together. Shout out to LaKaiser. And, she's in almost 100 retailers around the nation. She has her own store and kind of in the works of, getting another one on the West Coast. So it's been really great to work with a brand from the beginning to now. So it's where I'm at now.
I love that. I love that you said so many important things on there. So, what I'm hearing is that you had an idea. You kind of did everything that did you have a job while you were doing these transitions?
I did, which there's things we'll get into, I'm sure, much later. But yeah, it was a full-time job. I also, even though my business is in Los Angeles now, I live outside of Los Angeles. So anyone who's in California knows the commuting life. So commuting, round trip 2 hours a day, working an 8-hour job, working on it in the morning. But then when I got home, so I remember at that time I was getting the most, some days, 4 hours of sleep. Um, so it was definitely a labor of love. So when people say labor of love, I finally, know what that means. But yeah, it was really difficult at the time.
Yeah, I can imagine. And I've been there, trust me.
Yeah.
Lord. So, okay, so you started your business, working a job, and then you had a friend that needed some brand awareness, and you decided to take her on as a client.
Yes, I did. Thankfully, she was just kind of like, well, let's do whatever we can do to make this, succeed, let's do it. So she was a really great designer, or she is a really great designer, and a person who kind of let me experiment with different PR tactics, because I was also coming from a place where I had talked to other designers through the PR companies I was working at. And you kind of become because you're not at a senior level, so you kind of become a human complaint box, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I had gotten a lot of feedback and seen the insides of what was happening. So quite simply, it was starting a company based off of what not to do.
Yeah.
um, so that's kind of the principle I took, and I ran with it. There was a lot of things I thought I could do better, and there was a lot of things I was like, oh my goodness, that will not work. Designers are complaining about this. It's clearly not working, and we're just in it for the money. And I'm like, that's not coming from like a design background. I was able to kind of see it from the other direction, and was like, that's like, if I had a line, I wouldn't want that done to me. So it was just kind of about taking things that weren't working for a lot of designers, and reversing that and finding things that did work.
I love that. I love that. So finding a problem and then creating a solution for it is simply is what you did.
Yes.
I
Yes.
love that. I love that. So the work that you were doing for your friend with the jewelry line, I'm assuming it was pro bono. You were just throwing things out there, or was she paying you?
Yeah, in the beginning it was pro bono. I think for the first year, and that's why having a full-time job was so important. And if you're out there and you're trying to start a company, it's so hard to say, because burnout is a real thing.
Mhm.
But I would say, if you don't have a lot of savings, then you kind of have to do double duty until you're able to at least maybe not do full time. So yeah, that's how it was for the first year. And then she slowly started paying me, and then I was able to find more clients to pay me. And I slowly, it was a slow, long process. So it wasn't an overnight thing.
Right. So no overnight success.
No. This is not one of those stories.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So you mentioned getting more clients, and you said you got that from Instagram. So what does your Instagram strategy look like? Because a lot of people get on Instagram and they're just taking pictures and having a time and not getting the success of getting clients. So how are you getting those clients?
you know I gotta say, I maybe because I grew up with the digital media, I go down rabbit holes, to be quite honest. So I am just, in general, I'm on my phone all day, like, not even for work. So it's just, I think also, after a while, when you've been searching for so long, Instagram, your algorithm will naturally change, and the things that you're looking for the most will pop up.
Right.
So that's what was happening. I will go on, maybe certain stores that sell it. If you're trying to find a product client, go where your product is. So for me, I work with a lot of fine jewelers. So maybe I would start with like Moda Operandi, or at that time I had found one of my clients on, there was a website called Swoonery.
Mm.
So I found it on Swoonery, and then it just, suggested pages will come up. So then you click on a suggested page, and then it's just kind of
Yeah.
like a
Just
chain
kept going.
reaction. Yeah. So you just keep going, and then you're finding a lot more than you could have ever, actually asked for.
Right. Right. Definitely. That's great. I love it. So my next question was about your let me put in here to say that I asked Darlyn-Feythe to come on because I wanted to talk to women of color who were kind of shrinking the wealth gap. So this is still part of this series that we're working through. So I wanted to ask you, when you think about shrinking the wealth gap, what comes to mind?
Oh, I think that it's, you know, there's such a huge gap. And I actually, before this podcast, like getting ready for it, I did a bunch of research just to see the numbers visually.
Mm.
And it was very sad to,
Mm.
to tell you
Yeah.
the truth. And, you hear that there is a gap, but when you start putting it into numbers, then you realize like men really do make so much more. Like they actually worldwide, they hold 50% more wealth than women,
Yeah.
50% more. Um, wait, I have some numbers. And,
I love numbers.
yes, but women in general are paid an average of 18% for every dollar a man makes. Just women, no matter what color you are. Black women are paid an average of 37% less, and Latino women 45% less. Reading those numbers, I was just like, why is this even happening? Why, when there's maybe a male and a female recruit that have the same qualifications, why is the recruiter saying, oh, this man deserves maybe $10,000-$15,000 more than this woman?
Right.
Why is that? I'm not sure. I mean, I personally think that there needs to be some sort of education in there, to make people realize a woman's worth. Sadly, like as sad as that is to say, I can't believe we have to teach people about equality really on any kind, but when it comes to women, it's just, I'm not sure why there's such a disparity between the two, but it's actually really sad because for a lot of things, women sometimes perform the job better than a man, but a man will still make thousands of dollars more.
Yeah, it's similar to that trend that they had last year. I don't want to call it a trend, but diversity training that they had, right? So
Yes.
everyone needed to know how to treat diverse people. You know
So
what I
embarrassing.
mean?
It's like, as a human, um, why do you need to be taught decency? But, unfortunately, a lot of things are passed down. And, we always say everyone has common sense, but some things
Common
aren't
sense,
always,
not always too
it's
common.
not exactly, it's not always too common. Exactly. But yes, there needs to be essentially some sort of um, training. And I think, honestly, the taboo of talking about money in the workplace is another thing. When I first started, and even growing up, I was always taught, like, you don't tell how much you make. Like, don't tell
Mm.
people how much you make. And I understand that to a point. There's a privacy kind of thing going on. Like, I'm not going to get on here. You're not going to get on here and say like, oh, how much do you make?
Right.
But I do think when you're in the workplace, there's there it's okay to ask maybe like an estimate or a ballpark of, maybe like if someone's been there for 5-10 years, oh, how much was your starting salary? Are you comfortable? It's also about how you word it and you
Right.
deliver it. How much was your starting salary? And if you've been there like, the same amount of time, and you're only like currently $1,000 away from that, probably
Right.
need to run to your HR department or Indeed.com and find yourself another job. And if you're asking a man that, especially, then that's when you really need to find a plan B and really stand up for yourself.
So my question is, why is that even a factor? Why isn't there a base salary no matter what, the same across the board? Why is somebody offered more than another? Like, to me, that's just like common sense. If this job pays 50,000 to a man, 50,000 to a woman, either which way that it goes. If you're experienced, you have 5 years experience, you get an extra $10,000. It seems like there should be some type of calculation where it can kind of make a baseline salary for everything instead of it being based on gender or race or anything like that.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of people, because we also have to play devil's advocate for the other people watching this and say, people will argue, well, sometimes it has a lot to do with the previous companies you've worked for, on a resume. They'll be like, oh, well, you've worked, I don't know, I'm in California, so I'll just throw stuff out there. Like you've worked for Sony, compared to working for maybe, an indie production place. So people will be like, well, he deserves more. This must mean, he's been in bigger, I don't know, situations and positions. But I also think men go in asking for more, where women will just be kind of like, oh, well, this is what I'm making. This is what I was making. So I'm just going to round it up by $1,000 more. Where men will go in there more confident and be like, yeah, this is what I was making, but I can make $5,000 more.
Right.
It's their kind of confidence. And I think that a lot of times women don't have that natural kind of overconfident thing to go in there and say, like, I want more money, I need more money, I deserve more money. And men do. And it may start as a base, as like $50,000 or $60,000, but they're like, well, I've worked here, I've worked there, I deserve 65,000. Can you make that? But a woman will see the 50,000 and go, okay, well, would it be possible to do 52,000?
Right.
So you've already kind of negotiated your own self out before it even started. And that same recruiter, even though they just hired someone for the same qualifications at 65,000, will go, oh, okay, fine. 52,
right.
Great, saved money. So I think unfortunately, it's a push and pull of, we also have to go in offering more, also doing the research. When I was working, Glassdoor.com was my best friend. Take that average and round up. That's my best advice. Take the average, round up.
Gotcha.
And as I said, kind of, if there are men around that you can trust, or you can observe from afar, that's safe to ask, how much do you think this position will go, then ask.
Right.
If they say, oh, I can't, then that's fine, there's other people.
Always ask for help, right?
Yes.
So I think that's another thing that we are weak at is one of our weaknesses is that we don't ask for help when we need it, right?
Yes.
So yeah, I would have never even thought to ask a man for how much I think the salary for the position should be.
Well, it's an unpopular opinion, and it's kind of a murky topic, just because unfortunately there's been, when you are working with men for a mentee type of situation, there's been lines crossed. So of course you're not so readily willing to do that. And I've just been extremely lucky to know a few men in business throughout the years who've given me great advice. And I will say they do give great, corporate advice, business advice. And if you can find one, as I said, like, observe from afar, be cautious, don't just jump in and be like, oh, that's a man, he must know something. No, that's
Right.
not true. Make sure that they know what you want to know.
Right.
And just observe from afar and make sure whoever this person is hopefully a safe person to ask these questions around. I don't condone putting yourself into any situation that would make you feel unsafe.
Right.
But I say if you can find one, then ask, like ask an estimate, ask for advice, because they're also in a lot of companies the gatekeepers, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's true.
So really it's like that whole annoying saying of you're living in a man's world,
Yeah.
and it's really just finding someone who's willing to kind of take a chance. But as I said, like, it's not, some things aren't worth it. You have to kind
Right.
of walk away and find that chance on your own if need be. But I'd say, ask, like, what are they making? Like, what do they start with making?
Okay. Okay. That's
And
good.
kind of work from there.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Now, is there anything we can do? We've been talking a lot about jobs, and I want to hear if there's anything we can do on the entrepreneur side of things to be able to kind of shrink that gap a little bit more, because I feel like my personal opinion is that entrepreneurship is the way to be able to shrink the gap rather than having a job. I know most people do have jobs, but is there another way that we can think of this to be able to make more money?
Oh, yes. Well, now there's a lot of, funding and like female venture capitalists, which
Mm,
when I hear of like female venture capitalists, I get so excited because that's just like so much money that's like it's usually for a man to do that and to
mhm.
invest in things, but there's so many women out there that are doing it, and it's so amazing. So if you have a company that needs funding, because some companies you just can't bootstrap, then I would definitely, partner with a female venture capitalist, because then, it's the whole circle of female empowerment and wealth. And I mean, for in my specific industry of kind of consulting on public relations, it's a lot of women.
Mhm.
So we're not always competing with men, but I will say the few male publicists that are out there, they probably do make more than women. But as I said, I would say continue to know your worth and charge for it. And that's really hard. It was hard for me in the beginning. I'm like, oh, I don't, like it's always hard asking for more money. But
Right.
it's like you also need to live, but then men don't even look at it like that. Like we look at it like you just heard what I said. Well, we need to live. Men don't even say that, well, there's things that I want to do, there's things that I want to buy. But the moment a woman says that, it's like, oh, too much. So I
Right.
think it's also just kind of a mindset when it comes to money and how you're looking at it and asking for it.
I want to go back to one thing. Venture capitalists. Can you
Mhm.
explain what that is for people that don't know what a venture capitalist
Um, well, I'm not funded, so I can only tell
is?
you so much. This is a L.Woods PR is a bootstrapped company. Disclaimer. But it's mainly usually a group or a person who invests in companies, and sometimes they take an ownership, or I think there's also like angel investors, but
Mhm.
a venture capitalist, they usually invest millions of dollars into a product or service for it to go forward. And now there's so many um, companies out there that are female led that are investing in other female owned businesses to kind of get them to the next level.
I love that. Thank you. Yes. And yeah, that's definitely goals for me is to one day be an angel investor and kind of
Mm,
just give back to other women who
yeah.
need the support. So yes, thank you for that. So I would love to know if there's somebody's thinking about starting a PR company. What one bit of advice would you give to them about starting this type of company?
It's not an overnight process. Um, Unless, maybe you've done it before, or you are, I will say that publicity is very connections based, you
Mhm.
know. So not unless you have a really deep network, and even then really it's still hard because the competition, and especially where you are. So New York and California actually have the states with the most PR companies in the
Right.
country. So it's very competitive. um, so I think just being aware that you're going to have competition, it's going to take time, and find a niche, really find a niche of who your clients are. Now there's so many different categories that PR companies are doing. So maybe just focusing on what some PR companies have multiple categories. Some only have one. I only have one. I specialize in fine jewelry. But there's others that do beauty, do shoes, they do, like very like niche products. I know there's even CBD lines that they're focusing on. They only do products that partner with CBD. So I would really say find your niche, keep going. It's not an overnight thing. And if you really like it, then it'll eventually grow.
I love that. Thank you. So Darlyn-Feythe, I would love for you to share more about your website, what you have going on, your social medias, anything that you would love for the audience to be able to connect with you on.
Yeah, well, you can find me on L.Woods PR. It's Instagram. So it's the letter L, woodspr.com. And then that's the Instagram handle. You can email me, DM me. I'm there. We are kind of building our client list for 2022. So I'm really excited about that. Um, we just started working with auction houses for fine jewelry, so that's really exciting. And yeah, I'm ready for 2022, which is, I don't know, hopefully going to be even more amazing than 2020, 2020, 2020 part B.
Right.
So we can only go up from here for all of us. So I'm excited.
That's to say the least. The years that
Yeah.
have no name is what I call it.
Yes. The years with no name. But I will say on that, like, you as a brand, you really have to keep going. The
Yeah.
pandemic, I've heard so many designers and companies say, well, like maybe when this gets better, when this ends, adaption is, you have to adapt.
Right.
You really have to adapt to your surroundings and really kind of find a way to work around things. So that's what we've done. And so I'm going to try to continue to do, because it's no sometimes getting better. Sometimes this is the way it is, and we'll get better from here.
And it's
So
kind of pivoting around what the current better is, right? So
yes,
changing our mindset, like this is the new norm and it's great, and
yes,
just accepting what it is.
exactly. So we're all going even more digital for 2022.
Well, Darlyn-Feythe, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, no, it's my pleasure. And you guys have been listening to the Janelle Show. You guys have a wonderful day.